I'm Foggy Michael. This is one of my favorite stories from the days when computers filled entire rooms. This was 1972, just after I graduated from computer programming school. The only job I could find was as an IBM computer operator, so I took it. I worked second shift for Hilti in Stamford, Connecticut. One of my favorite jobs was putting on a tape sort. We had 4 IBM tape drives. Before I started the job, I carefully cleaned each tape head with those little tiny cloths that IBM provides and that pungent cleaning fluid. I didn't want the sort to crash while I was out gallivanting. Once everything was running, I'd head to Bridgeport, where my girlfriend Linda was waiting. We'd pick up a 6-pack of beer, spend a couple of hours together, and then I'd drive the 25 miles back to Stamford. On the way, I would be praying for 2 things. One, that the tape sort had finished successfully, and 2, that my boss didn't stop by. One time he did. The sort had completed just fine, but my boss was worried because I had disappeared. He actually started calling hospitals, thinking something had happened to me. Oddly enough, he didn't fire me. He gave me another chance. Early in the evening, before I started the tape sort, I had loaded tray after tray of accounts receivable cards, 80-column cards, that came up from accounting in the dumbwaiter. Those cards had to be merged with a newly sorted deck using the IBM collator. The collator was wired by hand with tiny wires that made it do what you wanted it to do. If a card was out of sequence, bent, or had been filed incorrectly, the whole process stopped, and the hunt for the bad card started actually. This was life as an IBM operator in 1972. There were no PCs, no internet, no cloud, just punch cards, magnetic tape, and the hope that everything was still running when you came back. One thing that fascinated me about those early IBM computers was what they looked like on the inside. Whenever you removed one of the large panels, you weren't looking at computer chips like we think of today. Instead, what you saw was a work of art. Thousands of wires ran in every direction, crisscrossing each other in an incredibly precise pattern. At every intersection was a little tiny donut-shaped ring. To a young computer operator, it looked more like handcrafted sculpture than electronics. That donut was actually magnetic core memory, the computer's main storage. Every tiny ring could hold a single bit of information. It's hard to believe that an entire computer program lived inside thousands of these little magnetic rings threaded together by hand. The IBM System 360 Model 20 had just 8,192 bytes of memory. That's only 8 kilobytes, about 1/600th the size of a typical photo stored in your phone. Think about that for a minute. What could you possibly do with 8 kilobytes? Quite a lot, actually. That tiny 8K memory helped run payroll, accounts receivable, inventory, and order processing for the entire company. It sounds impossible today, but the trick was that the data stayed on punched cards or magnetic tape. Memory was simply a tiny workbench where the computer processed one record at a time. If the computer started acting up One of the first questions the IBM customers' engineers would ask was, what was the temperature inside the machine? The heat could be a major problem. The thermometer was that wrong. It was amazing. I was wondering, where do you stick this thing? Looking back, computers were incredibly physical. You could see the memory. You could touch the tape reels. You could smell the tape cleaning fluid. You could hear the card reader and the printers pounding away. They weren't hidden inside little plastic boxes. They were living, breathing machines. My friend Richard was training me. Every now and then, we'd sneak off somewhere and smoke a little weed. I loved turning off all the lights, sitting quietly and just watching and listening to this machine at work. Sadly, Richard was badly injured after falling into an open grave just before his wedding. I'm sure he was stoned. After that, I was on my own. The IBM 1403 printer was incredibly fast. Miles of green bar paper came flying out of that thing. I was constantly changing forms, sometimes single ply, sometimes multiply, sometimes checks. The multiply had carbon paper in between, which I would have to remove later on, and I sure got dirty doing it. I was only 20 years old. I remember staring at those little tiny magnets and thinking, you're telling me this whole computer remembers everything because of those little tiny rings? Even today, I find that amazing.